Now, following a checkered history, Somaliland is still not considered an independent state by the African Union and the United Nations, even after it became a sovereign state on 26 June 1960. Some 5 days later, on 1 July 1960, it chose to unite with Somalia with the aim of creating a greater Somalia. Unfortunately, the formalities of a treaty of union to be entered into by both Somaliland and Somalia were not completed properly. For a look at this nation's outlook and its efforts to try and grow trade with the rest of the world, we're now joined by Dr. Mohamed Omar, Minister of Trade and Foreign Investment for Somaliland. He joins us from our Nairobi studio. Minister, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me on your program.
So I gave a bit of history so people understand when we talk about Somaliland, what we're talking about. When I talk about Africa, I always say, oh, 54 countries, but you have to remember, it is 55 if you include Somaliland. But of course, Somaliland has struggled to be recognized by the African Union because of the outstanding issues with the Greater Somalia. But let's begin with the mandate that you have to try and increase trade. Does that lack of a recognition make it even more difficult for you to get investors to come to Somaliland?
Well, you're right. Somaliland isn't recognized yet as a member of the African Union. But Somaliland has been taken very serious by the international community, including Africa. We are a reliable partner in terms of the security cooperation, in terms of economic cooperation. But also we are a very good model of Africa if you talk about democracy, because Somaliland has been a democratic state and a functioning democracy over the last more than 22 years in the Horn of Africa. We have had a successful elections and a successful transfer of power from one government to another government. So in many ways we are an example, a good example in Africa, but yet we have not been recognized. And my job as a Minister of Trade and Investment is to try and open up Somaliland for international business. We would like to have to welcome foreign direct investment in my country, because we have all the facilities that you would, as an investor, need to have in place in an African state. Yeah. So I think we're making some progress on that.
Yeah. Minister, I've got a guest with me in studio who's listening very attentively to what you are saying. He is Dr. Katsumi Hirano. He is the Chief Senior Researcher of the Institute of Developing Economies for JETRO, the Japanese agency that promotes trade between Japan and the rest of the world. So he would be very interested in some of the things you say. Why should he talk to Japanese companies about potentially looking at Somaliland and its relationship with the rest of the continent? What would he find? What would be the advantage for him?
Investors from wherever they are would find Somaliland as a country that has got a conducive environment for investment. For example, we have a good governance. We have a transparent democratic system in our country. We have what we call a one-stop shop, which is there's a single registration process for any international or domestic company. You don't have to go to different areas in order to get your registration. We have tax holidays. For the first 3 years, foreign investors don't have to pay income tax. And after that, they will pay a reduced income tax. They will have a protection of their assets. We will be able to give them an industrial land for their investment. We are linked with the international and local financial sectors. We have a huge amount of resources in our country: minerals, oil, agriculture, one of the longest coasts in Africa in terms of fishing. We are very close to Ethiopia, which is over 90 million people, and landlocked. And Berbera port, which is our Somaliland port, is one of the closest, if not the closest, to Ethiopia, and therefore we can be a regional gate in terms of economy to the region. So there is a lot of reasons why any investor would be interested to come to my country and invest.
Yeah, Minister, you sell very well, and I can see my guest is nodding his head about some of the things that you are mentioning. But let's talk about that relationship with the rest of the continent, because the lack of recognition, of course, makes it difficult then for governments to formally establish relationships with you. But have you been seeing any trade passing through your ports? As you say, you are very close to Ethiopia, which of course we know is an 80 million or 90 million people market, depending on who you listen to.
Yes, we have a good relationship a trade relationship already with Ethiopia, which is our next door neighbor. Ethiopia makes use of our port.
How much?
We are developing, not a lot, because Berbera port needs to be developed. And we are now talking to a number of key investors who are interested to change Berbera port into a modern container terminal, which would serve the whole region. By the way, not only Ethiopia, but next Ethiopia we have the Republic of South Sudan. Again, another oil-producing African state, which is landlocked and constantly looking for an outlet to the sea. Berbera port can offer an alternative to all those big business partners of ours.
When will that expansion be, and how much is it costing, and who is funding it?
We are still talking to one key port developer, which is ongoing. I don't want to discuss about the discussions we are having now, but we are not that far from, you know, looking into either we can conclude an agreement, or if we can't, then we will go and find other partners. But we are not far from having a conclusive arrangements with the key investors who want to build our port. Yeah.
Now, in terms of the companies that you have been talking to, are there any large companies that people can recognize that have already decided that perhaps Somaliland does offer a stable environment for investment?
We have a number of companies that are interested.
Give me some names, Minister.
Building, but also operating in Berbera. I can give you an example. Bolloré Logistics. Bolloré is a French company, well known, managing I think more than 30 ports in Africa already, mainly in the West Africa, French-speaking Africa. Is a well known. We have been talking to Bolloré. You know, we have been to Paris and spoke to them. They have been to Somaliland many times. We're talking seriously with Bolloré on a potential arrangement. But if that arrangement doesn't go through, there are a number of other companies that we can talk to see if we can have a deal. We're not only talking about development. We're talking about both development, but also talking about the operation of the port, but also building a corridor that links from Berbera all the way to Ethiopia. We're also talking about free zones and, you know, a lot of maritime projects that would put Somaliland in the map, economically speaking.
You spoke about other natural resources that are available in Somaliland. Can you give us some of them? You mentioned oil. Has this been established for a fact, or you are still exploring?
We have a number of companies who are now exploring, and I can give you an example. Is Ganel, which is a London-listed company, is known internationally. At the moment, exploring an oil in Somaliland. They are now doing seismic studies. There are a number of other companies. East African Resource is another company. We have DNO. There are a number of other key oil companies that are interested in Somaliland, but also exploring, and they have been given concessions.
So that's oil. Other minerals?
And there are a new Chinese company that is interested in our mines, and we just have given him a contract. But that's done very recently.